answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Put the kids to bed. Turn down the lights. Close the door. Now, buckle in and open your mind for the Roundtable Podcast with your hosts, Shogun and Rhodesian.
Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Thank you to the live audience and to Tech for making this recording. Today we are going to speak to Mr. I will call him Jay. His nickname is, however, Jizz in the Puss. Very classy nickname, if I may say so myself. He is an honored and valued member of the American Corrections Institution, a prison guard of sorts. And I know I train and work with prison guards. I have a lot of respect for corrections officers. I know how difficult and dangerous their job is and how fucked up the shit they see in prison can be. So I thought it would be really interesting to get some of these stories, some of this perspective from inside one of the largest, if not the largest, well, it is the largest prison system in the world. And we have the live audience here. Friends and family, please do join us on the Roundtable Podcast, the Roundtable Discord server. You can find us through the conspiracy section of Discord. You can Google Roundtable Discord. You can find us on all social media. We have about 14 podcast episodes available on our server. You can also find some of those on YouTube, the rest to come, and keep an eye on Podcast Addict, Podbean, and SoundCloud, where all the rest will be as soon as our social media team can process them. So, without any further ado, welcome Mr. Jizz in the Puss, who I will refer to as Jay for the rest of the podcast. Thank you for joining us, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good. Great. Thanks for agreeing to do this. So, first of all, why don't you just tell me, how long have you been working in corrections?
Well, I'm a former correctional officer, but I worked there for over a year.
Okay. So no longer involved in the corrections then?
Yes. I moved on.
Okay. Sounds good. So, that being said, what made you decide to get into it in the first place?
Well, to be honest, I wanted to get into some kind of field in law enforcement until I could eventually become a police officer. And I thought it would be a great learning experience, seeing as not many people have been correctional officers before, at least none that I've met personally. So, and plus, I never thought about it before until I heard that they were hiring. So I figured, why not give it a chance? So
I see. And how was your experience when you joined the training, the initiation, so to speak? How was your entry into it? How was your first impressions?
So when you first join on as a trainee, right? And you don't immediately go to the academy. They have a 3-month-long academy where you stay there 5 days a week. Then you go home. But my first 3 months as a trainee was in the facility. And, you wear a little goofy uniform. And you're lucky if you get a radio. But other than that, you just kind of hang around other correctional officers and you see how they do the job. And, my first impressions is, wow, there are so few correctional officers and there are so many inmates. And things seem to just be moving so quick. But, it's to say the least, it's overwhelming, especially your first month in there or so.
Right. So you go through your training, you've got your partners, your colleagues, your office, and what's your day-to-day? You patrol, what kind of things are involved?
So when you're a trainee, before you head to the academy, what you do is you're assigned to hang out with, or to rover. They just rove the blocks, right? With correctional officers. Every once in a while, you'll go in there. You'll do cell inspection. Well, the very first thing in the morning, you do roll call. Pretty much make sure everybody's in their cell. Make sure that you got the numbers, you got all the names. You make sure who they are. You check their IDs and all that. And after you get done making sure, the whole prison has to, at the same time, make sure everybody's accounted for, all the prisoners, and make sure that everybody down to just their names, everything's checked off, right? They don't just do numbers, they do the names, everything, and they have to have the IDs. So after they get all checked off, you turn all the numbers in, you turn in the names, and once they verify that everything's correct, then you open up to the rest of the activities for the day. They have breakfast at 4 a.m. before they do the roll call deal. I never understood why. They just did it that way. And pretty much go eat breakfast, then you go back to sleep, and then they go and account for everybody. And after that, then you have, church, and then you have classes, trade school, and doctor's appointments, stuff of that nature, and it's all scheduled throughout the day. Certain blocks go at certain times, but it's an all-day affair, just never ending. But other than that, what you generally did, since there was such a shortage of cubicle operators, or CCOs as we call them, correctional cubicle operators, generally what you did as a trainee is work the cubes because there's nobody else. And there was a lot of times where, even as a trainee, even though it was completely against regulation, they would assign trainees that, if they were lucky, had a radio to call somebody in case things go sideways, and they would send them out to supervise inmates doing things by themselves, whether it be taking out on the yard, escorting a few of them down the hall, making sure some of them go in their cells. And pretty much what the regulations stipulate is that you're not supposed to have any real one-on-one contact with the inmates. You're supposed to maintain a distance because you're just a trainee. You're technically still a civilian because you're not certified yet. You haven't been to the academy yet, right? So, the regulations stipulate one thing, but the reality of it's completely different. So, you pretty much do everything. The best way to summarize is you do everything your correctional officer does, just short of actually making inmates do things when they refuse to do it. And even as a trainee, you can write them up. So, yep.
Okay. So, tell us then about the first experience you had that stands out in your mind as either interesting, frightening, disturbing, unexpected. What was the first thing that made an impression on you as unusual or interesting in your time there?
Well, the first thing that surprised me is how much free roam and how much freedom the prisoners got, because you got to keep in mind, I worked at supposedly the strictest prison in the state, which was a level 6, the only level 6 in the entire state, or in the state's history, from what I understand. And, these people were, carjackers. People did things, they were embezzled. They did, you had some people that did non-violent crimes, but a lot of them did do violent crimes, such as rape. There was a lot of rapists. And then you had a lot of people who just were beating people half to death. You had people on manslaughter, stuff of that nature, stuff that wasn't death row, but pretty much just right underneath. And, in that prison, we actually did have death row. We actually had death row, and we also had the criminally insane part, mental health units. And then we also had a very small unit made up of juveniles, and they were the worst juveniles in the state. They were so bad that you couldn't put them in regular juvenile prisons. So, but to answer your question directly, the most surprising thing is how much freedom they had, and how freely they roamed around. Because there was a lot of cases where you had inmates that were from the completely opposite side of the prison, and they'd somehow managed to work their way hundreds of yards past a dozen or so correctional officers out into, like, say, the south side, for instance, which there's only 2 doors to get out there from, and would end up in one of the blocks out there. But that's pretty much the thing that stung me the most at first.
Well, that's the thing, is it's all broken down in blocks, right? They segregate right away.
Yeah, they're supposed to be. You're supposed to have assigned
Yeah.
areas, and people aren't supposed to mingle with each other. But, you know, as I said, there were so few correctional officers that, and there's so many inmates. I mean, you got to realize there's over 1,500 inmates. But I think the most we ever had on staff in the prison, as far as correctional officers go, is about 40. I think that's the max I've ever seen.
Oh, it's because you got them all locked up, that's why.
No, that's the max. Like, I know for a fact we're in the prison overall. It's not just people I've seen. That's because I actually saw how many people were in there, because you have to sign in on the same list as everybody else. And you only do have your names, but it's numbered next to their name. So
They including lawyers and visitors and all that stuff.
no, I'm talking about correctional officers.
Oh, just correctional officers?
Just correctional
officers?
Yeah,
We'll
people,
open
right?
it up for feedback later. We're not at that point yet, so please let me continue with the interview.
Yeah, sorry, dude.
So, that being said, I do have to ask, did you experience violence during your time there, either directly against your own person or against anyone that you saw, either other prisoners against each other, or was there any correctional colleagues who were ever assaulted?
Yeah, I saw tons of it. You know, thankfully, I never had it happen to me. It's come very close, not only from inmates, but from also correctional officers. And I mean, like, literally inches away from turning into a fight. But, which could have been fatal, because, like, it's against policy to carry knives and stuff of that nature in, brass knuckles. But a lot of correctional officers did, so, which is illegal. And as far as actually seeing and being a witness to violence, yeah, I've come very up close and personal. I mean, just for instance, I remember one day there was a correctional officer who had some kind of beef with an inmate because he kept irritating him when he was trying to take a sleep in the cube. Which the cube is a box, you could say, that has glass where you could see into both sides of the block, which there's a wall that separates them. So you could see both sides, but both sides can't see each other, right? So you could see pretty much the whole floor from that cube. And, there's supposed to be correctional officers out there on the floor patrolling, but there's not. There's supposed to be two on both sides. But generally, there's only one correctional officer to patrol both sides, so he just hangs out in the cube unless he actually has to go out there and do something, So, but this particular inmate insisted he had to go to see a doctor or something of that nature. I can't remember exactly, but he just wanted to get out of the block, right? He wanted to go out into the main hallway and go wherever he wanted to go. And he kept bothering the officer. And then when the officer told him no, because he knew he was supposed to leave, he started cussing out the officer. So that went on for a little while. Then the officer eventually pulled that guy out in the hallway because he's making a big scene and getting people agitated. And when you pull him out to the hallway, there's a little corridor that leads out to the main hallway. And in this little hallway, there's 3 doors. One that leads directly into the cube, and you got one left and right side that leading to both sides of the block. And so he pulled him into that corridor, which the only people that would be able to see him is the people in the block or the people out in the main hallway hanging around the small bit of glass, but no one ever did. So I just so happened to be the second officer with them, and we were both in the cube. I was actually the one managing all the cell doors, at least the ones that I could manage because a lot of them were broken. So, and I also managed the main doors leading to both sides of the block and the main door that head out to the hallway. But so this correctional officer that I was working with brought the inmate out of the block, went in the hallway. They had a chat, and pretty much what the officer did is stripped off all of his gear and they went toe to toe with the guy, in a fist fight. And he told me, like, hey, don't call a code red. And what a code red means is, officer on inmate, they're fighting, there's an altercation. So when that happens, all available officers come to that location to help settle it, right? Because, the grown men, they can kill each other very easily, even with just their bare hands. And he told me not to call. And so what happened was he went out on the hallway. He talked to him. I thought they were just going to talk it out, but then they started getting into a fight. And it only went on for about maybe a minute at most. You know, it was pretty quick, but it seemed like it drawn out a lot longer. But at one point, it seemed like the inmate had the upper hand, but the correctional officer very quickly got the upper hand on him. And when he did, he got the inmate on the floor. He was, keep in mind, this correctional officer probably weighed upwards of 300 plus pounds. He's a very big dude, about 6 foot tall. And he's just wailing on this dude's head, and his head was bouncing off the concrete. And he was hitting him so hard, he hit him so many times, so much force, that by the time it was over, his lip, like a good chunk of his lip, was peeled off and hanging off to the side. And he's bleeding profusely. And he had crushed the dude's right eye socket, and his eye was bulging out. So now, right after they started fighting, I called Code Red, and it took about a good 30-40 seconds before the other correctional officers arrived. But once they did arrive, what they did is they picked up the inmate, they handcuffed him, they brought him to infirmary, did the paperwork, all the other stuff, and the other correctional officer, he went, washed his hands, went right back to his post. So that's one example of the violence I've seen.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting. A similar question: what was the most in danger or afraid or threatened you ever felt, if at all, while there?
The most endangered I felt while I was there was when I had to work with one in particular correctional officer. Now, I've known through other correctional officers that this guy was the one who'd like to initiate correctional officers, see what they really were, because he would pretty much just scope you out, and he'd try to get you to do things. Like, for instance, in my situation, we worked in this post together. He seemed like a nice guy, talked about the weather, stuff like that, just having normal conversations. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he was like, "Hey, man," as he pulled a shiv out of his back pocket, he's like, "Hey, I got this problem with this one inmate in this one cell. And, you look like a pretty tough guy. What I'd like you to do is come with me. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to hold this guy back, and I want you to get a few licks in, all right? And we're going to take care of this guy, show him his boss, because he's been giving us problems for a while. And after we're done, we're going to plant a shiv in his cell, and we're going to go report it to the supervisors and get him written up and get him put in solitary confinement. All right?" And I was like, nah, no thank you. I'm not cool with that, He's like, "Come on, man. Come on. What, are you scared? What are you this, you that, And at one point, he's like, while he's demonstrating, talking about what we were going to be doing to this guy, he actually grabbed me by my collar of my shirt. And he was like, you're gonna grab him like this, and he like very faintly like touched my face with his fist, simulating like a punch. He's like, "That's what I want you to do. I want you to hit him square in the jaw. I want you to just break it. I want you to break his jaw. All right. I want you to really show me what you're really truly capable of." And after a little bit of this, it went on for a minute, and I could really tell he was serious, because at first I thought he was joking, But then once he became serious, once he opened up the cubicle door, left it wide open, opened up the door to the block, and there was a group of inmates just sitting there chuckling, because they knew what this guy does, because he's done it a lot of times before. But I knew, based off the stories I had heard, that it wasn't going to go down exactly as he said. What he's going to do is lock me in a cell with 2 other inmates, and he's going to have me fight them, because that's happened to multiple correctional officers there. And it's common knowledge. And that's how I was pretty much going to initiate it into the group. If I passed that test, I was going to be let in to a little circle, and I was going to be let on the, they're going to let me know, the real stuff that's going on, which I come to find out anyways because it was obvious. But, yeah, so after he became serious and all that, I was like, nah, bro, screw you. I'm leaving. So I went to the, supervisor's office, like, look, I can't work with this dude, okay? Blah, blah, blah. And they had me write a statement. But nothing ever happens to the guy.
Oh, yeah. For filing a complaint against a cop or a made man, as it were, in these systems is like not near impossible. They're brotherhood, if you will. Literally brotherhood. Like I posted in the recorded podcast chat.
Yeah, they even correctional officers have like their fraternal order, like the police do. Well,
like I was saying that, so Stanford Research Institute did the mind control research for a lot of them Army, and they recruit through methods where they give people jobs as security guards because they run a lot of the security guard companies, whether it be through corrections or just like independent. And they recruit people through that. They play street theater and stagecraft. They experiment with these security guards to see what they'll do so that they can then recruit them up into other things, whether it be, are you good for CIA, AT, whatever the country needs, as it were, in the little, because the whole brotherhood, as it were, connects to all the agencies, if you will. So,
yeah.
So, how was the quality of life as a corrections officer? Like, is it hell? Is it decent? I mean, how was it working your 9 to 5 or your whatever your shift was?
It's very, very unhealthy. It's one of the most unhealthiest careers you can have. Because imagine this: the very air you breathe, it's unfiltered, it's dirty, right? I mean, the stench you smell in a prison it's indescribable. It's just something that you have to be there and experience yourself to know what it's like. And it's a stench you'll never forget, right? And it's a mixture of dirt and grime and rot and human feces and human fluids, all of them, right? And you got to realize that you're dealing with some of the most disgusting people that ever have and ever were. I mean, there was guys that would get in trouble because they would go months without taking a shower. I mean, their literal toenails would be rotting off from fungus. Like, they'd have, like, algae growing on and crap like that. And then the reason why they did that, though, a lot of people did that, was so they wouldn't get raped by other people. Because...
Well, that's a fear, too. But whatever, like, soon as you have a shower in the range, like before you come on the range, and then when you come on the range, all right, we'll require you to shower again, all right, just to prove to everybody that you're fucking at least double scrub. Because I've seen it where there's crabs, all right. You as guards get crabs fucking dealing with those people all the time, and it's crazy.
You work corrections too?
No, I'm on the other side of the fence.
Oh, I see. I got you.
I've done time.
Understood.
Time.
Gotcha.
As a juvenile and as a young adult, and I've never gone back.
Well, that'll be interesting. Then we can get both sides of the story here. Ultimately.
Yeah.
I've done 90 days, but I did 90 days in jail. That was the most.
Well, finally. Put it out there. I've done about 6 months.
You said you're in jail,
and
right?
I county, not prison.
Paul, you said you're in jail, right?
Provincial, yes.
Yeah, jail and prison are completely different.
Yeah,
we'll get your story after, Paulie, but I do want to, since we have him as a special guest, I want to get through the questions I have about the correction system, and then we will indeed open it up to questions and an open discussion. And we'll get your story in specific, Paulie. But until then, I got a few more questions here to ask. How about drug use among the... well, first of all, I was asking what was the quality of life? And you were describing how dirty it was, how grimy it was, and how smelly it was. But it sounds overall like a horrible job.
Yeah, I mean, okay, imagine this. My prison, it's 100 years old, okay? So, and even they did a lot of updating, and they did a lot of refreshing, and a lot of it's rebuilt, But... I think the last time they did an update was like in the 60s or 70s, and it really has been touched since then. So imagine like all the metal you see, all the paint's flaked off, it's all rusty, it's all halfway gone, right? The doors, you could tell where they've been welded like 6 times over from coming apart, even though they're solid, just about solid steel doors. They've been banged on and beaten so much, and they're so old and they suffer so much fatigue for being slammed and everything else that you had to weld them together, especially at the seam where, the lock, is. Not so much the rest of the door, just specifically right there, but people would slam them so hard it would kind of break them. But, I mean, like every door handle you touched, if you were wearing a white glove, you just touch one door handle, right? You don't have to grab it that hard. You don't have to rub it, do anything. You just touch it, open it, you close it, you look at your hand, and it's just covered in this yellow goo, right? This yellow and brown goo. Every door handle you touch in the prison. So pretty much you're constantly washing your hands. And when you work in a cube, right, it's 12 by 12, right? Square feet. It's pretty small. You have a sink in there, and you have a toilet in there. And there's no divider. There's no nothing. So they expect you, because the minimum shift is 12 hours, but more often than not, you work 16 plus hours. There was cases where I worked 20 hours straight. A lot of time I worked 16 to 18 hours. A good day was just minimum 12-hour shift, but that was very rare. You got mandated a lot because there just wasn't anybody else to take your position. If you're not there, then there's nobody. So, yeah, and not only that, you can only bring in items in clear containers, and, the only way you can cook it, if at all, is by microwave. So you can't bring anything in there and cook a nice, good meal. You can't bring raw foods, things of that nature. You can only bring enough just for one meal, even though you might be there for 12 to 16 hours because they don't want you to give it to inmates. So there's a lot of cases where I'd only eat once a day, or twice, because I eat breakfast, of course. I'd eat twice, and I wouldn't get off till 2 o'clock in the morning the next day. I'd show up at 6 a.m., wouldn't leave till 2 a.m. the next day. And then in some cases, quite a few actually, they wanted me to be back there at 6 a.m. to work the next day. So sleep deprivation plays a role into it. There's next to no exercise because your whole job is to sit there and watch inmates and escort them around. So you're just standing there all day or sitting down all day for 18 hours straight. So not a lot of physical activity. And it's quite depressing because you're locked in a box, more or less. You're a prisoner yourself because you can't just go willy-nilly walk around. You just got to sit there and watch the inmates. And because if anything happens, you're liable. So, but yeah, when it comes to the toilets, so if you're a correctional officer sitting there, and you got to go to the bathroom, it doesn't matter if there's another guy in there. You got to go. Well, if you want to go, you got to go to that toilet right there, which is a few feet away from them. And the thing is that the glass, while being somewhat tinted, you can still see through, especially in the upper levels and the blocks. So the prisoners would sit there, and every time you peed or pooped, they could see you doing it, right? So there's not much privacy for you either. But yeah, it's very disgusting, to say the least. Especially if you have the guy sitting in the cube as a correctional officer, you have to sit there and smell the other dude taking a crap 5 feet behind you. So, yeah, I mean, just everything you touched was so disgusting. Everything was decaying. Everything was rusty. And I mean, it just, it just never got cleaned. It was just years and years of built up dirt. And the whole place, even the concrete was chipped away. The desks were falling apart. The ceiling tiles, even the inside ceiling tiles had water damage, and some of them even had mold. So I mean, it's just one of the one of the least healthy places you could ever work. Period. And on top of that, not only just the prison itself, but you're also dealing with people who have diseases like AIDS, hepatitis, herpes, so on and so forth. A lot of which are incurable. So,
Well, curious question. Like, do you guys segregate those guys, or do you guys know
We're
the
not allowed
ones
to.
that are actually HIV?
Where
You-
they passed
you're not-
they passed HIPAA laws. We're not allowed to know what diseases they have. They can tell us, but they generally don't. But supposedly, they had a lawsuit saying that, oh, well, you're discriminating against us because we have these diseases, and you can't do that because that goes against our constitutional rights. And they won. So they used to keep all the people with incurable diseases in a specific prison, so that way, you know, the whole prison population throughout the state would have widespread cases of AIDS and stuff like that. But since they passed HIPAA for the inmates, now AIDS and herpes and gonorrhea and syphilis and all those things are very, very rampant. So,
Well, absolutely. So, do they notify you before you got to do a raid or go jump in on an inmate that's like,
nope,
like, did they got to notify you before?
nope, you're not allowed to know.
Holy
So
crap.
I wanted to ask. I mean, so basically, it's what you're describing is like a kind of a hell. It's like you're in some kind of a living hell. You're not allowed to sleep. You're not allowed to eat. You're saying they limit the amount of food you bring. I mean, this is shocking. I didn't realize that they treated the corrections officers this badly. I don't understand why they would.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're not unionized, or your union's not doing a good job, or something.
Yeah.
So you said you left after a year, and it seems pretty obvious why. Right? Nobody would want to do this for a long time. So what was the breaking point? How did you decide to get out? Why did you decide to get out?
There was a
Yeah.
there's a few main reasons. I mean, there was a crap ton of reasons, of course. Everything I brought up. I mean, I hated all of it. Or none of it was good. But to put it in perspective, I was working upwards of 80 hours a week towards the end. Okay, I was making some money, of course, through overtime. But I was only making $12 an hour. I've got the only raise I got since I've been there was a 15-cent raise per hour. So even though, you know, I showed up to work, did my job, and went home like everybody else. And not only that, the governor, since considering the fact that the wage has been the exact same wage for the past 30 or so years, governor of the state was going to pass, you know, a deal where it would raise unilaterally the pay of all correctional officers across the state, regardless of what facility they worked in. So it's going to raise the minimum wage. But if you worked in a higher security prison like I did, you're going to get paid extra on top of that. Now, they were doing that beforehand in a percentage type deal, but, you know, it's like 15% of $12. So it's nothing. All right. It's a negligible raise. So, and they don't give you hazard pay either. That's another thing. They were supposed to implement that too. That's supposed to be part of the bill. So when you worked in super dangerous prisons, or you did things like, what is it called? Armed escort, you know, or armed transport. You know, armed transport is what it's called, where you transport inmates from either to other facilities, other correctional facilities, or you transport to the hospital for when they need medical care. Things they can't handle in prison, which they do have their own doctor's office, and they do perform limited surgeries in prisons, and, you know, things of that nature. But the big time stuff, they bring them to the hospitals. So, but you know, she was going to pass that bill, but she decided not to. So that was one thing that made me really angry, because, you know, I was told all this time that I was going to get a huge raise, and it never happened. So that's one thing. And second reason, the second big reason that made me quit the day I did quit was the fact that, second reason should be the fact that I was showing up to work, right? I had this problem with their electronic log where it was not keeping track of my hours properly, right? And you're supposed to sign a physical sheet. Well, there was days where I'd show up, my supervisor, which me and him didn't get along, he'd say, "Hey, I got you. I'm going to mark you in. Go ahead and go to your post." I'd be like, "Okay, gotcha." Well, turned out he wasn't marking in when I went to the office. He wasn't marking me in for those days. So on physical paper, I wasn't there. I wasn't signed in. But the electronic logs, I was marking them down. You're supposed to go. You punch in your number, you put in a thumbprint, it clocks you in. And then when you go to leave for the day, you put in your number, you leave your thumbprint, and it clocks you out, right? What happens is that when it gets towards the end of your 2-week period, you're supposed to go to the secretary lady, and you're supposed to say, like, yeah, those are my hours. You're supposed to sign off on them, right? And you have an account which you go on there, and you say, yeah, these are my hours, and you click accept, blah. So what had happened is for whatever reason, a lot of my hours started disappearing. I was working 80-hour weeks, and I was only getting paid for 60 hours or so. And this isn't just a 1 or 2 time thing. This thing had been going on for months. And I've been talking to people about it, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to get the situation fixed. And when I went to go see the actual physical written logs to prove that I was there on those days, when I brought it up to the warden, they refused to pull the logs because they put them up in this cabinet in this other area of the prison. And it was supposedly only certain people had the keys and blah, 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 all the excuses. But they wouldn't pull the logs to verify that I worked those days. So I had pretty much, once I did the math, I got screwed over around $1,800 or so, which, some people is not a big deal. For me, that was a huge deal. That was pretty much a whole month's pay right there that I've been screwed out of, that I worked my butt off for. And the third and biggest reason, especially what made me quit exactly when I did, of the night I did, was the very last day I was there. I had worked a 12-hour shift. I wasn't supposed to get mandated. I got mandated 2 days before. I worked 16 to 18-hour shifts the 2 days before, right? So by their rules, by their standards, you're not supposed to get mandated again. Like, they can't do it. But my supervisor said, to hell with those rules, and he mandated me again anyways because there was nobody else. Half the people that were supposed to show up that night didn't show up for work. And it was only a handful of them anyways. So the last night I was there, they mandated me to work on a day I was supposed to work, so I had to work 16 hours straight. And not only that, there was only 12, I believe, people in the entire prison, and that's including the sergeant, the one lieutenant, like 3 cubicle correctional operators, the secretary up front, and a handful of COs, correctional officers, and then me being one of those 12. All right. Keep in mind, there's still 1,500 plus inmates in this prison. Nothing's changed, right?
So what were you going to do if something actually really broke? What would the actual response be? You guys would go lethal right away?
What? Well,
so what Paulie's asking you is if shit were to really hit the fan in the prison and there was like a riot or something, what would be your response? And would you use lethal firearms immediately, or would you use like sandbags or something?
No, you're not allowed to carry guns to prison. Period. Not even the non-lethals. You can't carry a taser. You can't do any of that because what happens is that if you go in there with a gun on your hip, what's keeping 3 or 4 inmates from grabbing you up and one of them ripping the gun out of your holster and start shooting everybody, right? So that's why you can't do that. If a riot happens, what you're supposed to do is lock down the block. If you're in the cube, lock the cube up and leave. And get out to the main hallway, get to the front part of the prison. There's supposed to be these gates that cut the hallways in half, separating all the blocks from each other. On top of the cells are already supposed to be in, and the doors that keep them from getting out to the main hallway. So, and what happens is if they take control of the prison, if it's a small riot in one block, then you get all the correctional officers together, and you go in there and beat the hell out of everybody until they stop rioting, and you spray them with mace. But if it's a prison-wide and you don't have enough correctional officers, which would have been the case, what you do is you just shut off as much of the prison you can, make sure everything's locked. You go to the outside. In the absolute worst case scenario, they bring in the state troopers and local police, including correctional officers that work there at the prison, and they will surround the prison. And what they'll do is they'll call in CERT, which is like pretty much corrections SWAT, which their whole deal is their specially trained unit within corrections that goes in and handles these riots. And they're some of the biggest guys you've ever seen in your whole life. They look like NFL linebackers. And they wear special gear, and they use things like tear gas. And, I think they use shotguns with bean bags and stuff of that nature. But usually it's just mostly tear gas, gigantic batons, like ones that are like 4 feet long. Tear gas, spray, and they just beat the hell out of them too. But by the time you hit them with the tear gas and the spray, they generally don't have much fight left in them, and when they do, you just beat the hell out of them with sticks. So, yeah, that's how you handle that. But, anyways, as I was saying originally, I was one of the, 12 people left in the whole prison that night. And, they had me going around by myself, doing, as I said earlier, at the beginning of the day, you pretty much do like this roll call, you go and verify, you have this many inmates in a block, and, they are who they say they are, and they're in the right cell. Well, they had me doing this all by myself in multiple blocks. I went and had a count by myself over 600 inmates and verify all of them by myself. And the only person that I had watching over me in one of the blocks was a 79-year-old man that had a knack for falling asleep as soon as he got into the queue. So pretty much nobody was watching me. I was all by myself. And the only thing keeping the inmates from grabbing me and doing whatever they wish, because they sure shit outnumbered me by over 100, was just them not wanting to, I guess. Just feeling like it wasn't worth the hassle. Because a lot of their cells didn't even lock. Because the doors were broken. Or they had
by 100, right?
Yeah,
you
by
said
100.
14 people, 1,500 people on fucking lockdown, or it's supposed to be a lockdown. That's crazy, dude. Man, I can't believe you worked.
Yeah, no, it's the only reason why I'm alive right now is because they decided they didn't want to kill me for whatever reason. It's not over exaggerating. If they decided they wanted me dead, they could have killed me. Because, shivs, they're very real. I have 3 sitting in front of me that I took home. You're not supposed to take them home, but that's the only way you get them out of the prison. The only way you can stop a shiv from getting back into the population is if you just completely melt it down into just a tiny little piece of metal, and throw it in the garbage and hope it gets taken out, which you probably won't. Somebody will grab it and form it back into a shiv again. Or you just take it completely out of the prison, period. But there's an endless amount of shivs because there's parts of the prison that are made out of sheet metal, and you can tell that they'd be ripping away at it. And there's no way to stop them. They just do it when there's nobody around because there's not enough people to watch them all the time. So
Yeah, I laughed. Okay, listen, I did time, right? I've already admitted that. And the way to make weapons is so easy.
yeah,
right?
it's easy.
It is. And it's just as easy to sharpen a little fucking toothbrush. One end, and then they shorten the toothbrush. Right? It's still a deadly weapon if you'd be able to sharpen it properly.
Yeah. Actually, let me see if I do. Yeah, I got a picture of them. I got a picture of 2 of the shivs I have. Where can I post it for y'all to see?
What do you have shivs when you're a correctional officer?
I brought them home to get them out of the prison. And only that, they're souvenirs. There's people that work there that had over 100 shivs that they put in cases to be like, yeah, this is what I got from work, because they're all handmade, so they all have their own, I guess you could say, character to them, right? One of them I have is a piece of sheet metal that's folded over and was sharpened on a piece of cinder block, and the handle was formed by melting a plastic bottle around it. And the other one I have is they don't get mirrors in their cells. They get this piece of metal that's somewhat shiny and reflective, so you kind of see yourself in. Well, that stuff's pretty malleable, right? So it's I think it's, more along the lines of aluminum. I don't know if it is aluminum. It might actually be. I'm not sure, but it's a lot more flimsy and a lot more malleable, as I said. A lot easier to tear and form into a shiv. And I'll just post it in general chat real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. But
Well, don't put it in general. Put it inside the podcast chat.
how do I do that? Where is that at?
Right above us.
Recorded podcast. Okay. I'll put it right here. But
Because I made concrete out of paper in jail.
uh-huh.
Alright, and it was hard as a fucking rock. And maybe if I would have got creative before I got into metallurgy, I probably would have created a paper mache with a piece of soap right in the middle of it, just for weight. Give you the soap treatment.
But yeah, as you can see in that bottom one in that picture, they made the handle out of shoelace.
Hey, it looks like a dirty shit chev.
Yeah. It's just metal they tore off the side of the building.
Hey, it looks like somebody would have shit on that thing, too.
That's rusted metal. The top one's just rusted metal. Now, of course, when I brought it home, I bleached it because everything there's disgusting. I actually soaked them both in bleach and then washed it with Dawn dish liquid just to be extra safe, because it's rusty metal anyways. But yeah, that was after I cleaned them. So
Still, you're a brave man. I wouldn't handle those without gloves. And I've been in jail.
Gloves. Yeah, but that's my job. That was my job to go and take those from inmates and hope they didn't stab me with them when I wasn't looking. So, which I did. And, but yeah, I mean, the only reason, as I said, why I made it out is because they decided not to stab me. Because correctional officers, they'd go and confiscate shivs and they'd sell them right back to another inmate. So that's what they did. They take cell phones from inmates that they find, and they'd sell them back to inmates. There was I knew a correctional officer that he was one of the few that he was in with them, but he wasn't. Like, he played the game, he talked just to be in with them, but he actually was about his job. Like, he actually did his job. And he was one of the very, very few that did. He wasn't just in there to abuse the inmates and, sit there and ride the clock like most other people. So, but what he did, how he found out for sure that these phones that he was turning in were getting recycled back into the population, because when they get shipments of these phones, they get like 20, 30 of them at a time of the exact same phone, right? And it's generally like the cheap smartphones you get from Walmart. But even the ones you get from Walmart for like $100, they sell for $1,800 in the prison. So, the way he found out that he was confiscating these phones, and the exact same phones he would confiscate and turn into the leadership, his sergeant, his superiors, would end up back in population, is he would copy like the 10 or 15 digit serial code, whatever it was, in the back of the phone. You open it up, and he started checking phones, and he did not only on once, but on several occasions, went back and compared the serial numbers off of phones he swore he confiscated already. And when he's confiscating the second time, he would match up the serial numbers, and it would be the exact same phone that he gave to his sergeant, who supposedly went and followed procedure and put it in a lockbox in the front of the facility, away from population, to where it's impossible for them to get to. The only people that have access to it are lieutenants, captains, and wards. So, but those are the three highest ranking people in the whole command structure there at the correction. So, but so what he started to do, instead of just turning these cell phones in and having them end up right back in population, what he just did is he just took rocks and he just started beating them and breaking them into a million pieces. So, and that's how you stop that. And when it comes to shivs, he'd take them home with him, get them completely out of the prison. So, and any other kind of little piece of contraband like that, you just destroy it, or you take it completely out of the prison. So that's the only way you can stop it, really.
So one more question. at least. What was the drug scene like, both in terms of the inmates? Are they able to get drugs? What drugs do they take?
Yes.
And also in terms of the guards, how many of them are on drugs, and what drugs did they take?
Okay, so drugs. We have this one particular thing. All right. Or how about I'll start off with the lowest thing, the alcohol they made, right? It's not a drug, but I think it's worth mentioning because they call it julep, right? And the way you make julep or prison alcohol is what they do is they take fruits and vegetables from the kitchen, right? And they'll get one of those big plastic containers that used to have cooking oil or vegetable glycerin or whatever in it, right? They'll kind of, rinse it out, and they'll shove all this fruit in it, and that they stole from the kitchen, the kitchen workers. They get it out with all kinds of stuff, and because nobody shakes them down. But so they take all this fruit back to the dorms or whatever, or the block, and they shove it in this plastic container, and they put it in a corner, and they hide it, and they let it ferment. And, in some cases, they even make it in toilets, the same toilets they use. And, what do you call it? They just let us in the corner to ferment, and they drink that stuff. And I got to tell you, man, it's some of the most disgusting stuff you'll ever smell, because even when it's ripe and it's ready, as they call it, when they start drinking it, and they always do it, like, in advance for, like, college football season and stuff like that, because they get to watch the football games on the flat screens in their blocks. And they'll make the alcohol in advance and they'll drink it during the football games. But I'll tell you, when you're going to smell some stench, smell that stuff, because it still smells like rotten fruit. They drink it all day long. They love it. But, then you have the classic stuff like weed. They get snuck in, but not a whole lot of it, but it's pretty expensive stuff anyways. And, meth and crack, but it was that stuff is super rare, and I never had any firsthand contact with stuff. Never caught anybody with it, at least. There probably have been a lot more people using it, but never caught it. But one thing I have caught, which was the most common and the most dangerous drug that they had, was a thing called Flocka.
No.
And
Flocka's just good coke, isn't it?
no.
No, absolutely not. Flocka is fucking hard.
Yeah.
That's like MDA, fucking everything you
It's
want
like-
to show.
It's actually it's a cathinone. It's APVP or MDPV, and it's like a really he'll probably be able to tell you more about the effects, but it's like meth on meth or crack and meth mixed together or something like that. It's like the most intense and fucking crazy stimulant you can imagine.
Yeah. Like the Flocka you hear about on the streets is stuff that makes people eat other people's faces and run full speed into people's windshield butt naked. But the Flocka I'm talking about in prison is different. It's not the same Flocka. They just call it that because, why not?
No, it's still made from eyedroppers, dude.
Yeah, well, the Flocka I'm talking about, what they called, which was what they did is they took a piece of paper, right? They had Terminix guys come out every so often around the prison, and they would spray for cockroaches and all kinds of other stuff. It's just pesticides, right? What they would do is they take regular sheet paper, like you get in a notebook, and they drop it in the pesticides. They let the pesticides soak up into the paper. And what they do is cut them in 5 square meter little squares, millimeter squares, right? Millimeter squares. And what they do is when they have like a top, as we call it, which is a roll-up cigarette, you can buy a pouch of rolling papers and tobacco all in one. And that was the most common thing they smoked in that prison because that was the cheapest you could buy. Because the pack of Cools was like $9. So, so they'd roll up a top, right? They put the little tobacco in it. They take one of these little squares and they put it in and they'd smoke it. And the side effects from it, which happened, in some cases the first time, but especially after repeat uses, you just end up becoming a vegetable. You would become brain dead. It would literally destroy your brain. It would kill your brain because you start hallucinating because you're being poisoned.
Yeah, he's a PCP.
No,
No,
right.
he's talking about pesticides, but this is blowing
Yeah, I
my mind
know
because
that's
hold on, Paulie.
same as smoking ammonia, Shogun.
Paulie. But this is the second time that people have been telling me about fucking people getting high off pesticides, and I thought I knew all the fucked up shit there was to know about drugs and shit like that, but I did not know people were abusing pesticides until recently. And now you're saying this is going on in prisons too.
Yeah,
That is just mind blowing.
Anything that is extremely toxic up into the point of just killing you straight dead immediately will make you hallucinate, which will cause this high of some sort. It's not really you can't really say it's a high. It's just your brain's dying and your brain's spasming, so it doesn't know what it's actually doing. You're just hallucinating, really, more than anything else. And given the environment they're in, a lot of people, some people do it intentionally just to kill themselves because they know if the first time doesn't get them, the second or third time will definitely get them. But you really know it's a suicide when people smoke 4 or 5 of them at a time, because if you do that, they go brain dead. So, those little tiny squares. And, they don't smell like anything either. The only way you really know it's that flock of crap, or at least someone's trying to peddle it as that flock of stuff, is when you find somebody that has these little squares, these little tiny cup squares, pieces of paper, just sitting in their pocket, wrapped up in a little baggie or whatever, So that's, but you can smell it all day long. You can touch it, it won't kill you. It won't make you high just from contact. But if you smoke it, yeah, it just screws you all the way up. And as I brought before in a previous story, one experience I had hands-on, and if you don't mind, I'd like to give the full detailed version this time. There was one night in particular where I'd come to work, and they had just got done cleaning out a lot of the Southside blocks. Southside prison is, imagine this, like in the inside of the prison, in the hallway, you got a door that leads into a little hallway, and you get the blocks, right? And it's inside, and those people stay inside all day long, right? They get about hour to yard time a day. Other than that, they stay in their indoor cells. They're inside. Now, the South Side are the people that are supposedly not as bad, and it's open. Like, you got these, I guess you could say, like warehouse-looking deals where it's just an open floor, right? And where you have the toilets, it's just a little center block wall, and you got a tiny little curtain, and it's about chest-ish height, But people's heads will be sticking out over the top when they're using the restroom, so you can see everybody just about. And, the toilets are pretty much like almost on the floor. So it's just disgusting. And, the shower is like 2 center block walls and then a curtain in the middle, So, but other than that, it's completely open. It's just an open floor plan. And what they do is they have these little bunks. They used to have them stacked 2 or 3 high, but now they're just 1. And they have them like little squares where you can walk in between them, like, little walk paths. And they get a little cabinet to put their stuff in. So, and they have about 200 inmates or so in each one of those, give or take, depending on how full capacity they are. But generally, especially towards the end, I think there's about 100-ish there in each one. But anyways, yeah, so they just got done going through the South Side, which is about 5 separate these little warehouse deals. And they went and got as much contraband as they could find. One common thing we would do is we'd do shakedowns, right? The whole deal. Like, everybody, catch your bunk, we're going to go by and go through your stuff, or we'll, in some cases, order them all to go outside so we can just go through all the crap and not have to really worry about them. So, where you literally, like their bed, you'll rip up all the sheets, you'll take up, not rip them like to shreds, but rip them off the bed. You'll take the pillowcase off the pillow, go through all that, turning everything inside out. You go through all their clothes, which they usually keep in bags, and all their legal paperwork. you can't really look at the legal paperwork and read it, but you just look through it, make sure they don't have anything hidden in there, of course. And you shake all their clothes, you feel all their clothes, you put them off to the side. But pretty much by the time you're done, it looks like a tornado went through because you literally took all their crap and turned it upside down and around, right? And but I guess they didn't do a good enough job because on this particular night, this guy, not long after I got there, just got done smoking some Flocka, the little piece of paper dipped in pesticides. And next thing you know, he's running around. Like at night, they don't chain lock the front doors because we have to be able to go in and out, and we allow them to come out at night to smoke cigarettes. They don't smoke cigarettes inside. Even though they're allowed to, some inmates don't like it, so they go outside to smoke. So we leave the front door open. So this guy runs out the door into the basketball court, right, which is fenced in. And we're walking around within the basketball court. We see this guy. He walks out right behind us, or runs out of the block right behind us. And we turn around and look at him. He's panting. He's talking to himself. His eyes are his big saucers. And all he's wearing is a pair of boxers and one sock, right? And this guy's like 5'5", but he's pretty stocky. And he's just running in circles for a while. So we're just kind of looking at him, and we tell the other inmates, like, hey, go get them. We generally tell these guys go and take these guys and put them in the shower. If they don't do anything bad, they don't cause a big scene, then, whatever. We'll let the other inmates take them and go put them in the shower. We won't screw them up. We won't put paperwork on them. None of that stuff. So, which they were going to go get him, but then all of a sudden he went and jumped a 12-foot tall fence with barbed wire. Yeah, like it was nothing. Like he cleared it in like 2 seconds flat. And once he got over it, he was out in the field. And that's where, once you get to the outside of the field, that's where the outer perimeter fence is. That's where it's like the 3-layer fence, the razor wire at the bottom of it, the top, and in between, and all that stuff, the electrical fence in between, all that. So he ran around that field a little bit, and it was me and one other correctional officer. The sergeant went to go get somebody else, but me and the one correctional officer went over there, and we ran up to him, mace out, batons out, ready to fight, because these guys, they put up one hell of a fight. They get like superhuman strength on this crap, and a lot of them work out, which doesn't make it any better. So, but the correctional officer I was with told him to lay down. So he just got down on the ground on his back and just laid there staring straight up at this guy, stiff as a board, hands along his side, everything. And when he had jumped that fence, it caught him pretty good because I was looking at him, and he had chunks of flesh ripped out of his foot, and he was bleeding from his torso, got a couple gashes in his leg. So it got him pretty good. I mean, you could almost see the bone in his foot. So he caught that barbed wire pretty good. And so after a couple minutes, a few of the correctional officers showed up, and they're about to move in to go handcuff him. They're going to take him to the infirmary and then, probably bring him to solitary confinement until he's not high anymore. So, but as soon as the other correctional officer arrived and realized they were about to move in on him, he jumped up and he was like, y'all motherfuckers ain't shit, y'all ain't taking me. And started, going crazy, jumped up, was going around circles. And he focused on this one correctional officer. Now, this one correctional officer had his baton drawn and had his back to the razor wire. He was only a couple feet away from it. And for a reason, the inmate rushed this correctional officer, and the correctional officer kind of jumped out the way and hit him with the baton at the same time, which knocked the baton out of his hand, just due to the way he hit him. And the guy pretty much jumped head first into the razor wire. And when he went into it, he kind of turned himself around, kind of sat there for a second, and that same correctional officer who tried to hit him with the baton, he got his baton, put it up, pulled out his mace, since the guy was just sitting there for a second, and he sprayed him with a whole can of Saber Red, which is some of the nastiest spray you can get. And as I said, if I'm not mistaken, you have to be law enforcement of some kind, or you have to be certified to buy the stuff. They don't just sell it to the general public, because it's just that hot. And spraying with the whole can. Now, when I was at Corrections Academy, you had to get sprayed with this stuff. You get one squirt ear to ear. And, I mean, it burned for hours, right? I couldn't open my eyes for like a good 15, 20 minutes. Like, you know, I handled it pretty well. A lot of people freaked out and ran away and were crying and just, you know, some of them even threw up because it just hurt so bad. But even I almost started freaking out because, you know, your body starts producing so much mucus, it feels like you're drowning, you know, in your own spit and stuff. So, but yeah, I couldn't even open my eyes. This guy was sitting here with his eyes wide open, getting spray in his face, and he's just blinking away, and he's like, y'all ain't shit. Y'all ain't nothing. You know, something about demons, whatever, right? And so he turns around after getting doused with the whole can of this Saber Red and just starts crawling through the barbed wire. Just crawling through it. Now, keep in mind, it's like 3 spools. Like, you got 2 on the bottom, you got 1 in the middle on top, right? And he just crawls through all of that, right? Gets to the other side, towards the fence. He's actually touching the outer perimeter fence now. And then he turns around, crawls all the way back through it, right? And by the time he gets through that second time, pretty much all he had was the waistband of what used to be boxers and a few tatters of fabric still left. And then, you know, I'm pretty sure that sock was gone. I can't remember, but there wasn't much of it that was still there. So, by this point, he is bleeding out of every part of his body. He's got, you know, deep serrations everywhere. I mean, he's just bleeding profusely. I mean, it was low light out there, but you could just tell that, like, all the grass he touched was just covered in his blood. It was just straight red. And, you know, at first we really didn't want to jump on him, but we had to, because otherwise he's just going to kill himself and bleed out. So a couple of the correctional officers who had gloves grabbed onto them and pulled him out of the razor wire, put him flat on his back. But even though he's all cut up and just bleeding profusely, he's still strong as all hell. And 2 grown men had to struggle to hold him down. And the third one came up, grabbed his legs so he couldn't kick or do any of that. And then the fourth one came up and put the cuffs on him. But one of the people that was trying to hold him down was a sergeant. And when he was trying to push the guy's head down because he's trying to reach and bite the other correctional officer, when he went to go put his hand on his head, his thumb went underneath his the skin on his scalp. And, you know, you could just, I saw it happen right in front of me. You could just see the look in his face. He just wanted to throw up. And he took his hand right off and, you know, repositioned his hand to hold him down. But, I mean, by the time the correctional officer was done, putting handcuffs on him and, you know, holding him there until the wheelchair arrived to put him on, to strap him to. You know, I mean, everywhere they're grabbing him, they're pretty much, their fingers are going inside of him. And once the wheelchair finally got there, he's pretty tired by that point, didn't have much fight left in him. It's probably due to also the lack of blood, and that the high off Flocka doesn't last that long either. It's a very quick high that goes away, depending on how much of it you smoke. And they put him on that wheelchair, and they just brought him to the infirmary. He had to get like 100 stitches or something ridiculous like that. I'm surprised the guy didn't die, but yeah, he's still alive and he's still in prison to this day. And yeah, that was the worst I saw firsthand as far as that goes, at least with Flocka.
So thanks for sharing that. That's a crazy story, of course. So my question would be, do you feel you've suffered any like PTSD or effects of depression or anxiety or anything as a result of the shit you saw in prison?
No, I wouldn't say PTSD. You know, it made me feel some type of way. I have a lot of bad memories. You know, a lot of it makes me more angry than anything else. But you know, it's just one of those things that you know, doesn't make you feel good. You know, but it yeah, you just don't forget it. You know, you think about things and you feel the exact same way as it did when it happened. You know, the one feeling I feel a lot about it when I think about all this stuff is just disgust on how bad this is. Because the whole reason why it's like this, because the people who have been elected to make sure things like this don't happen aren't doing their job, and they're greedy about it. You gotta realize, like, we were making around $20,000 a year, while the warden makes about $130,000 a year base salary, gets a government car, gets a cell phone, not just a regular cell phone, a smartphone, and he gets a house provided to him by the state, and he doesn't have to pay for any of his meals because he also gets given a special card. So, I mean, he pretty much lives for free, and he gets paid all that money. And not only that, he also gets bonuses for quote-unquote efficiently running the prison and saving money, which was by not paying us and was not investing any of the money he was given by the state to fix the prison, not using it for that either, just pocketing all of it, really. And the other thing is that the fact that the whole reason why there's nobody wants to work there is because, one, there's no pay, it's horrible working conditions, and not only that, the staff who's actually there. When we were in academy, we had a guy who was part of the Department of Corrections, and he was ex-Air Force, this, that, and the other, been involved in corrections for years, and he literally told us straight up, because we asked about this, because, people that went to the academy, I guess they felt reassured, like, hey, once I get out of the academy, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to do things by the standards, we're going to change things, right? And some of the, these guys have worked at these prisons for a couple months before they went to the academy. And they're like, well, why are these people that are doing all these things that are wrong? Because even the instructors of the academy knew what was going on at these prisons, because they go and work at them sometimes, too, to make extra money. They said, why don't we do anything about these correctional officers? He said, the DOC official said, we actually have files built up on a lot of these guys. We have a lot of stuff. We have things in these guys where we can put them in prison for years and years, right? The same prisons they work at. The problem is, though, is that we don't have enough people to replace them. If we went and actually arrested or indicted all the correctional officers we have dirt on, then that would be probably over half. That would be about over half the force, he said. And pretty much what would happen is we'd have to surrender control of the prisons to the federal government, which is still an option right now, from what I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Every one of you guys that have been convicted can turn around and go to another state and relocate their family because you got those qualifications. That record does not follow you because you're part of a union.
No, we weren't. There is no union for us. They can just fire us anytime they want. It's a right to work state. So.
Or are you part of the sheriffs or what?
No, I was a correctional officer, a state correctional officer.
Yeah, Paul, you're not following because it's all good. But so my question then would be, what have you moved on to, if you're comfortable talking about that, or what are you looking to move into now?
I'm still going through the process of becoming a police officer. And right now, I'm a volunteer firefighter. And I also work for a security company where I pretty much, the whole job is I drive a big truck, a big armored truck. We go and we pick up money for businesses and we take it to a bank. That's it. That's the whole job. And I wear my own private firearm just in case anyone tries to rob us. And that's pretty much it. So, but once I save up enough money, I plan on finally starting my college education. I want to go to school for criminal law, and also some of the military. I'm hoping to go and take advantage of some of the programs because the military not only pays for college, but they also pay for trade school. And I would like to go and get my CDL because there's plenty of jobs where a CDL is applicable, and you can get a raise just for having a CDL. And plus, knowledge is power, and it never hurts to have an extra certification or two, right? So, at the very least, it shows that you're able to take tests and pass them, right? So, but yeah, I mean,
So I was going to ask, if you could go back and talk to yourself before you ever went to the prison system, would you just tell yourself not to do it altogether, just pass that, or are you glad for some reason that you went through that?
Well, if I could tell myself, if I could go back and tell myself anything, it would be to leave the correction sooner and start in the police, start trying to do the police process sooner. Just outright. But, going through the corrections deal, I think made me a wiser person, because I wanted to know what was going on. You can read the reports, you can watch the movies, but nothing beats going there and seeing it for yourself. I wanted to be like, yeah, I've been there and I've seen that, done that. Because everything else is hearsay. You could say you could be hear all these stories from all these people all day long, but when it comes down to it, you weren't there personally, so you don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt whether or not what they're saying is true or not. The only way to do that is just go there and see for yourself, and that's what I did. And I thought it was going to be bad, but I didn't know it was going to be as bad. I didn't know it was literally going to be like some of the movies, and even worse than the movies in some areas. So, because it's just all out. There's no main character in real life where he somehow makes it through everything. Like in Shawshank Redemption, right? Where people take a special liking to people and things just work out. And blah blah blah. It's not like that at all. Everybody there just gets screwed over. Everybody from every inmate, every correctional officer, everybody. The only people that really make it out are the people that are doing all the dirty work. And that's how you can really tell the difference between a good officer or a not dirty one and a dirty one. Is the dirty ones would be driving Mercedes-Benz and Cadillacs off a $30,000 a year salary, while the non-corrupt ones would be driving 20-year-old Corollas. So, yeah, I mean, it was a learning experience, and it made me wiser, and in some aspects you could say it made me stronger, because I was seeing some of the worst of the worst. I mean, there's plenty of other things I could talk about that happened there, but I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm going to save y'all from all that. But yeah, there's some pretty gruesome things other than what I saw and what I've actually described so far or told y'all about that I've been a witness to. So.
Well, yeah, and we can go on as long as you want, or as long as the room wants, and also we can always do another recording as well at another time.
Yep.
But thank you very much for sharing that much of your story. It's really interesting. What a utterly fucked up system. From top to bottom. It's pretty mind-boggling to imagine your job being one of 12 people, I think you said, in an entire prison with no guns and a bunch of crazy inmates.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Yep. Some of the worst.
Not real guns, right? By the way,
no guns. Period.
Yeah, no weapons, no nothing, not unionized,
you
terrible working conditions, only 12 people. It doesn't even make any sense.
Against 1,500 to 1,400 fucking people, like, what the fuck, dude? Like, are you serious? And you said you had beanbag guns, right? 12-gauge beanbag guns?
No, that was only for cert. And I don't even think they used those inside the prison, to be honest. I think they just used tear gas, the big-ass batons, 4-foot-long ones that look ridiculous. Like, imagine, like, the regular black baton you used to see the back of the day? It has a little L-shaped handle and all that. Imagine that, but like 4 or 5 times longer and like twice as thick. Yeah, the cert teams use batons like that, and they have the rest of the riot gear. They have the shield, they have the gas mask, they have the helmet, they have the pads, the stab-proof vests, all that stuff.
I could teach 3 guys in the first line, right, to take you guys down. And then end up fucking being on top, and we got 3 shields, 3 batons, instantly. Right? So as I take you down, right, I'm going to strip you, and my boys are going to take your weapons. Might take some shots or whatever. You better fucking kill me, because I'm going to fucking get more. And it's going to be a scenario that you do not like.
Gotcha.
I've never been in a prison riot before, but if I were to orchestrate one, let me tell you, you're not going to win.
Anyways, does anyone? Okay, well, first of all, again, thank you for your story, and we definitely can do more prison stories as another podcast if you want to do that sometime. Is there anyone else in the room who has a question at all or something they wanted to comment on? Did you have anything else you wanted to share, Jay, before we wrap it up? Either another story or just a message or parting thoughts?
Well, I guess the very last thing I can talk about, which is something I've thought about a good bit, when it was happening and after it happened, of course. There was one scenario I was in where I responded to a code red, where it turned out it was a bunch of inmates fighting each other. And these two inmates in particular had a beef with each other. And there was a third inmate that got in between them, trying to stop them from fighting. But what ended up happening is he got the crap out of him. He got stabbed like 20 times all over his body. And he got, I don't know how the whole fight broke down, but he ended up getting stabbed in the same spot in the leg like 6 or 7 times. And it looked like he got shot by buckshot in the leg. I mean, his leg was just tore all the way up. He was bleeding profusely. And this happened around noonish. So we got him. He took an ambulance to the hospital. We followed in the truck, the corrections truck, and or van, and we followed to the hospital. Got up there. We went there, guarded him because you got to still in the inmates. You have to have at least 2 correctional officers per inmate. And I sat over this guy, the one that tried to break it up, and he was in the hospital for about 10 or so hours. And before he finally got put into a room, and that whole time I was, with him, and I was looking over him, make sure that he doesn't escape. Of course, is pretty much the whole deal, and make sure that no one goes there and murders him. So while he's sitting there, I asked him what happened. He broke down the situation for me. How this homie had a beef with this one guy. He's trying to stop it. They just weren't having it. One guy started stabbing. He tried to fight back. The other guy jumped in out of nowhere, started stabbing him. That was friends with the guy that started stabbing to begin with, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how he ended up the way he was. But throughout the time sitting there, we had nurses come in and out. And, they were going over his body. First thing they do is they look over it, and they have a little chart, where they sign off, where he's been stabbed, what the injury is, whatever, blah. So, like, for the first 3 or 4 hours, these 2 nurses sitting there, they're playing on their phones, do whatever. I mean, they didn't even give this guy a bandage to put over his leg. I mean, he's still bleeding profusely hours after the fact. I mean, there's a pool of blood on the bed. All right? And keep in mind, this is at a regular civilian hospital. And some of the nurses that were working on him didn't even know he was an inmate. They asked, one of them actually asked me, now keep in mind, this guy's right in front of me. He's handcuffed to the bed, right? And I'm standing over him, in a full corrections uniform with a gun on my hip. And he literally asked me, the nurse asked me if he was a correctional officer. So apparently they were just that negligent. They just didn't care that much, because they didn't even know that he was an inmate, and they weren't even looking after this guy. I mean, it was unreal. I don't know what the guy did to get in prison. I didn't really sympathize for him too much, but at the very least, he did have rights, and not everybody in prison, deserves to be gutted like a fish or treated like an absolute animal. Some of them did make big mistakes, and they ended up in prison. They're doing their time. Some of them did one offense, and they've been in prison for over 20 years and haven't done anything since, or they're reformed or whatever. But anyways, so this guy was sitting here bleeding profusely, and we've been sitting there so long, they changed out nurses like 2 times. And I actually had to go and talk. I actually got to go and get a nurse 3 separate occasions. Finally, on the 3rd occasion, I was like, hey, this guy, he's bleeding profusely, right, out of his leg. Now, he's bleeding out of other places. His arm, now that I remember, was fractured, and part of the bone in his arm was sticking out of his skin. And he also had been stabbed about a 1/4 inch to the left of his spine twice on his neck. So, I mean, this guy is in an immense amount of pain, right? But the thing is that he's like just bleeding so much blood. And so I said, hey, can y'all like at least like put a bandage on it, something to help lower, the amount of blood he's bleeding, right? And finally, the 3rd time I talked to the nurse, because I was actually legit like afraid this dude was gonna like bleed out, which even if I didn't care for the guy at all, it'd still be bad news for me, because if he's at the hospital and I'm watching over this guy and he dies from bleeding out, I get in trouble. I could go to jail. So, but anyways, so the nurse finally said, all right, yeah, I'll put something on it. He took a piece of gauze and literally slapped it on the dude's leg. Didn't tape it, didn't do nothing, just put it right on the wound. Just, there you go. He walked off. So, after a while, they came in there, and they did x-rays. 6 hours he's been sitting there, just in that bed, waiting for something to happen. And so they came in and they did x-rays, and with this little machine, which they moved around. What they did is they put this little board between like his legs and behind his arms, wherever they're x-raying, right? And they're making this dude flip and roll over and do all kinds of crap while he's just bleeding everywhere. And by this point, with him rolling over and everything, the whole bed is covered in this guy's own blood. I mean, it looked like someone just got murdered on top of this guy. Like, he just gutted a pig on top of him. I mean, it was just so much blood all over the guy everywhere. And it was getting on the floor and everything. I mean, it was just a mess. And they just had this guy roll over and take these x-rays, and then he started screwing up the x-rays, so he had to come back and do them again. It was a shit show. And finally, they brought some nurses in there after 8 hours of being there. And they finally started stitching up some of these wounds. Now, when they went to go stitch up the leg wound, as soon as they removed the bandage, there's a big squirt of blood that got on one of the nurses. Which, if I'm not mistaken, if it does that, that means that artery was nicked at the very least. And the blood just wasn't clotting, really. And if it did clot at all, the clotting was gone as soon as you ripped that bandage off. So, they sat there and they gave him a little shot of cortisone, and they just sat there and they just stitched him up. And after about 2 more hours, they finally moved him up to a room to get the rest of his care. But, while he was sitting there, I was sitting there talking to him, he's like, man, because he was sitting there for hours and hours, without water or anything, and they couldn't give him water. I can't remember the exact reason why, but they have these little things. It's like a little sponge on the end of a stick, and it's like they wet it with just a little tiny bit of water, and you suck on that to help quench your thirst. And, they had to put him in surgery, I think, for his arm. And that's the reason why they didn't want him drinking anything or eating anything. So, they gave him those little deals, and he's like, man, you're the only person, let alone correctional officer, that's ever done anything for me, like pretty much my entire life. You're actually one of the good guys. None of these correctional officers give a shit about us. They'd let me die if they could get away with it, just so they could go home early. And he's like, I heard about you before, man, but I didn't know you were real like that. And, when I get back to the camp, I'm going to let the boys know that you're one of the good ones. He was like, thank you for the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it, just for treating me like a human being, And towards the end, I when he said all that, I kind of felt bad for the guy at that point, because I'm human, and as I said, I don't know what he did. He probably might have all he could have done is just stole a car or two. You know what I'm saying? Probably never hurt anybody, because we did have guys that were in there for that. They stole a car and got like 20 years in prison for that crap when they were 18. So some of them, even as young as 16, got sentenced to 20 plus years for stealing cars and shit like that. So, there's actually quite a few of them for that. And
absolutely, you could have got lumped, or that guy could have got lumped by the police officers or in the corrections with doing nothing but stealing a car, right? And that guy went through the process, having to do 9 months, 6 months, whatever it is, depending on where you are. All right, and that's time served. Some people learn, sometimes people don't learn, and that's a factor, right? So,
yeah. But I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is, I don't know what he did. It's just human being to human being type deal. Like, even though I know he's an inmate, I can still kind of sympathize a little bit, And that's what I'm saying.
Well, that little homie could be nothing but a crackhead that wants to get back out in the street and do some more crack.
Yeah, but I mean, you're looking at human beings. Though. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, these people are real. These people have emotions. They have families. They're humans. They're not animals. They're not a dog. They're not just this, sentient being. They're not like a smartphone. They're actual living human beings with emotion. Breathing human emotions. You know what I'm saying?
All right, okay, and I'm calling you out from the other side, and I've done a minute.
Yeah, you went to jail.
Yeah, I have, and I've done a minute.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I'm not gonna fucking glorify my time going to jail and all that stuff. That was a fucking opener. All right,
yeah.
That was an eye opener that I don't want to fucking do again. But on the other aspect, watching you guys on the other side of the fucking bars, that's bullshit.
That's not bullshit. We didn't do a crime. That's our job.
No, that's not what I said. Some of the aspects of watching you guys break crimes on the other side of it, you just explain the whole scenario right there. Right? Those aspects of you guys breaking crimes, being on the right side of the law, as being on the left or whatever, that right there goes across every one of the fucking prison systems that go across the universe. Well, not universe, but countries anyway. Being the United States being the number one incarceration country. It's a money maker.
Okay. Well, all right. Regardless of that, that's just what happened. So, anyways, what are you gonna say, Shogun?
Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. If I had some final questions, I think I did ask before, and I can't. Did you answer my question about drug use among the prison staff?
Yeah, I answered all that stuff.
Okay, because I remember you said about the prisoners and what they were using. So the other question would be, do you think there's any chance of this getting better, or is this whole prison thing just going to be a never-ending nightmare that just gets worse and worse?
It can get better, and I can tell you exactly how it can get better. The reason why it is the way it is because the person who is in power right now, if I'm not mistaken, is the governor, because the person before her went to prison himself for embezzlement and all kinds of other corruption and scandals, right? So, in her policies, they're pretty much the status quo. Just keep things the way they are. In certain states, there's this thing called the good old boy system. You scratch my back, I scratch your back, screw everybody else, right? We keep all the wealth and all the power consolidated between a handful of people, and the governor handpicks the what do you call it?
can't remember the exact name, but the chief of corrections over, like, he's the head honcho. He's the guy that oversees everything to do with corrections, right? He sets the standards of training, and he sets rules and guidelines, and he does inspections and blah, blah, blah. But he's the head honcho. He answers directly to the governor, right? And he's the guy that picks wardens and so on and so forth, right? And he's the guy that's supposed to be making sure that the wardens are the right people for the job and that they're actually enforcing the regulations and the laws, right? But the problem is that the guy we have in power right now, and I've met him in person, actually, he's as crooked gets, right? And he knows full good and well what's going on, right? And the reason why the wardens, the people that who the wardens are, why they have those jobs, is because it's all political. They weren't chosen for the job because they have the most experience. Some of these guys have never even been correctional officers before. They were just given the job.
No, the aspect's actually even better than that. They actually charge you to be in jail every single fucking day in the United States. Shogun, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you, they charge you to be in jail per day. So, like, when you leave jail, you have to actually fucking make that money to get the fuck out of jail because you owe.
Is that true? I've never heard that before. How can that be?
Oh, it's the sheriff's office.
Is that true, Jizz in the Puss? Do the prisoners get charged every day they're in jail and have to pay a bill before they can be released?
Yeah, like $275 a day or something like that.
I don't recall anything about that, but that's jail. I'm not a jailer. I'm a correctional officer, or I was a correctional officer. Really different. I mean, I'll put it this way. The difference between prison and jail, the way you get treated is in jail, you're stuck in a cell, right? Just all day long. You don't go to, like in prison, you get to go to church, you go see doctors, you go to this, you got programs, you got trade school. In jail, there's none of that. Jail is supposed to be a temporary holding place, right? So you're in a cell, get a little bunk, get a little toilet, get a little sink. You might get to go outside for a couple hours a day, whatever. Other than that, you're stuck in that cell all day long. There's no cafeteria they bring you to. You eat in your cell. They make you little TV tray dinners and all that. You know, whatever.
Well, it depends if I'm max or if I'm minimum. If I'm maximum security, federal installation, that's 1 hour out of my cell every single day. I still get that 1 hour. Well, you don't give guys 1 hour there?
We have to. Unless they are.
I know, and you screws like to fucking cut it down to 45 minutes.
Hey, come on.
45 minutes, and well, they cut it down to 45 minutes. Oh, you got transported. It took 15 minutes to transport you between two blocks or whatever just to get to the yard. But you only get 40 minutes or something like that. I've seen it.
Anyways, I'm going to just ask Jizz and the Puss one more time if if this podcast ends up getting heard by a couple hundred or whatever people, what message would you want to get out? I mean, just use the platform, anything at all you'd want people to take away from your story?
I'd say do research and make sure, at least to the best you can, that they're right for the job. Because you put the wrong people in power, corruption happens. That's how you get situations like this. That's how you get entire systems that are just broken, like correction system. I mean, it's really important that you go out and you vote, even not just for the governor, but people in the lower. Every office position matters. You need to have the right people in the right positions in order for the state and overall the country to run at maximum efficiency, and for the rules and regulations to actually be enforced. And things won't change until we stop voting in these people who serve purely for themselves and not the benefit of others. That's pretty much all I got to say.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share this story with us, and I'm glad you got out of that. This sounds like a job that nobody really deserves to have to do, but we appreciate that you did it. And thanks for everybody for listening and coming out. And again, if you want to do this again sometime, jizz in the puss anytime.
Yep, sure thing.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tech, for the recording. And why don't we wrap this up here? I'm not sure how long we've been going, but it seems like a good point to end on.
Mm-hmm.
So we can just jump down to the roundtable for freestyle discussion. And again, if you're listening on a podcast, you can find us on the Roundtable Discord server. You can find us through the conspiracy theory section of Discord, or just Google Discord server roundtable or whatever. We're also on the roundtable.com or something like that, and on social media. See you guys later.